Hello and welcome to Screencast number 2, The History of Political Parties. Today you're going to learn about the development of our two-party or bipartisan system in the United States, featuring today's current political parties of the Democrats and the Republicans. You're going to use this video and the notes on this video to fill out the guided note sheet, and the guided note sheet looks like this. So all you have to do is fill out these boxes wherever you need to based on the information that you're going to find on your screen. So let's go ahead and get started. In the beginning, there were factions, not political parties. This is at the beginning of our country's U.S. Constitution. After we have the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation, we realize that with the Articles of Confederation, it's just not going to be strong enough of a federal government for us to actually survive. So while we're creating the U.S. Constitution and trying to ratify or pass the U.S. Constitution and put it into effect, two specific groups, or again, factions, developed in order to really debate how much power should the federal government have. As we've said before in class, that dividing issue was, is, and always will be the dividing issue in the United States. How much power should the federal government have in your life? So let's start on the left side of the screen under Federalists. Alexander Hamilton championed the idea that we could indeed have a stronger federal government that actually would take care of the citizens and protect their rights. He was the optimist, I think, of the group, and he believed in the wealthier people being in control of the government. Mainly that was people in the North who supported manufacturing and industry. Now, he also favored close ties to Great Britain because, of course, he believed that that would actually help support our manufacturing industry, and we had historical ties to Great Britain. So as our founding fathers were writing the U.S. Constitution, because they had totally scrapped the Articles of Confederation, Alexander Hamilton and his crew really wanted to create a stronger federal government that had the power to do what was necessary, unlike the Articles of Confederation that couldn't tax, couldn't enforce its laws, only had one branch of government, and actually made states more powerful than the federal government. Anyone who didn't support the Federalists were labeled by the Federalists as anti-Federalists, which actually wasn't very nice to be called anti-anything, but the other side of the argument didn't get a chance to name themselves, so they were just labeled the anti-Federalists, and it kind of stuck. And so in this group, you have Thomas Jefferson and his crew that believed that yes, we needed a stronger federal government than the Articles of Confederation. Pretty much everybody agreed on that by the mid to late 1780s. But these guys wanted to emphasize states' rights and individual rights. And Thomas Jefferson believed that America's future lay in the hands of the agrarian farmers, agriculture, not manufacturing and industry, because we had such a huge country. And of course, we had the chance to expand. We had all of these natural resources. So he believed that our future lay in agriculture. Now, he favored close ties to France and not Great Britain because, well, we had just beaten Great Britain in a revolution. And he liked the idea of revolutions in general, giving more power to the people. So he favored closer ties to France and, of course, supported the French Revolution. And he was actually in France when the U.S. Constitution was being written. And again, if you need to pause at any point to make sure that you get all of the notes or go back and listen, or if you have any questions, be sure to ask those in class, or of course you can email me. But these two groups, again, are factions, not political parties, because we don't even have a working government when these guys are discussing what should our government look like when we're drafting a constitution. And don't forget, a constitution is a law or a set of laws, so they must be obeyed and followed. A constitution also explains how a government should work. So this is what creates the three branches of government. Next, we have, after the U.S. Constitution is in operation, after it was ratified, so after 1789, you actually have the development of the first two political parties. Now, of course, this is after George Washington becomes the president. And George Washington, by the way, never had an official political party, but he tended to like the Federalists and believe in a bigger, stronger federal government. So he was kind of more of the optimist about the federal government being able to control, of course, not only our country and the people, but also protect their rights. However, George Washington did not like political parties, and he actually warned that they may actually divide our country and create a lot of conflict in our country. Imagine that. Smart guy. So if you take a look at your screen, you have the Federalist Party and the Democrat-Republican Party. These two are the official first two political parties in the United States. So the Federalist Party on the left side of your screen has the same ideas as the Federalist faction as you have above on your notes. The Anti-Federalists, of course, didn't like the name Anti-Federalist, so as they created an actual political party, they renamed themselves something they felt was a little more positive, the Democrat-Republican Party. Now, the Federalists on the left side of your screen, they believed in a bigger federal government, and so they liked a looser interpretation of the Constitution. As we all know, I hope the Constitution is kind of vague in a lot of areas, so they liked the fact that they could interpret the Constitution to give the federal government the power that it needed to in order to govern the people more effectively. However, on the right side of your screen with the Democrat-Republican Party, they had all the ideas of the Anti-Federalists that are above on your notes. They also, of course, wanted to add a Bill of Rights that protected individual rights because these guys are about individualism. They believed in the strict interpretation of the Constitution. They also liked the fact that the Constitution was vague, but for a different reason. They said if the Constitution was vague, that you should not read into it in order to stretch it like the Federalists would believe. Now, eventually the Democrat-Republicans dropped that name because it's kind of lengthy to just becoming the Democrats. And they believed, of course, in a smaller federal government. So the question, how much power should the federal government have, by the Federalists would be answered a lot, whatever they needed to do. And for the Democrat or Democrat-Republicans, they would say, not so much. Let's let states actually deal with what the people need. The problem happens in the War of 1812, and if you'll notice on the screen, the Federalists are going to die out after the War of 1812. That's a pretty interesting story, but to try to summarize that, a group of Federalists in New England tried to make an agreement with Great Britain during the War of 1812, that's who we were fighting, and they were going to try to make a peace agreement with Great Britain. And it made them look really un-American because they were trying to do this with Great Britain, almost looking like they're surrendering to Great Britain just a couple of weeks before the war is over. And so once we defeat the British, again, in the War of 1812, because we already beat them once in the American Revolution, we beat them again in the War of 1812, and the Federalists look really unpatriotic, un-American. And this is at a time period when nationalism was high. I mean, we just won the American Revolution. We just won the War of 1812. We're a strong country. And nobody wants to be a Federalist anymore because they look really un-American because of the fact that just one group wanted to surrender, basically, to Great Britain during this war when it kind of looked like we were going to win. And so they die out, and we only have one political party left. And so by the 1820s and 30s, we have a time period in history called the Era of Good Feelings. So this is a time period of high feelings of nationalism and only one dominant political party for just a little while. And that dominant political party, of course, believed in a smaller federal government. So this political party would dominate not only the presidency, but also Congress. Well, everything in the Era of Good Feelings is fine and dandy. Hey, we feel good about ourselves as Americans. Feelings of nationalism, we're doing great, we're launching our industry, we're making sure we're trading with other people. Things are going great for us. Then we have Andrew Jackson. So this is a huge dividing issue that faces our country, really the first main issue that divides our political parties beyond the ratification of the Constitution. Andrew Jackson's presidency causes a split within the Democrats. Because Andrew Jackson, if you notice on the right side of your screen, he still believed in small federal government, but he believed in a big, powerful executive branch. And this makes him look very tyrannical to a lot of folks, and it actually leads to a new party. People that actually opposed Andrew Jackson significantly created their own political party to oppose Andrew Jackson and, of course, other Democrats. Now, when you take U.S. history, you're going to learn a lot more about the specifics of Andrew Jackson, but this is one political cartoon that the Whigs launched against Andrew Jackson and their feelings, of course, of him being a tyrannical leader. This political cartoon puts Andrew Jackson in the position, of course, of a king. At the bottom, you'll see it's called King Andrew I. and it's at the top, born to command, on the left side, a veto memory, and on the right, had I been consulted. If you'll notice at the bottom, King Andrew with his nice little shoes there, frilly shoes, is stepping on the Constitution of the United States. And he's holding in his hand a veto. He vetoed the rechartering of the Second Bank of the United States. Of course, the national bank was championed by the Federalists as an implied power, if you remember that, in order to try to take care of America's national debt that we had after the American Revolution. Well, that first national bank lasted from 1791 until 1811. The Second Bank of the United States was going to be created in 1816, just a few years after the end of the First Bank of the United States. And a lot of Federalists believed that a Second Bank of the United States would be very beneficial, of course, to create, of course, to deal with war debt from the War of 1812 and some other issues going on in America. And so there is a Second Bank of the United States created. It was supposed to last from about 1816 for about 20 years to 1836. In 1832, when legislation appeared in Congress for it to be rechartered, so to last another, say, 20 years, Andrew Jackson vetoed that. He did not like the national. He actually felt like that was too much power for the federal government, which is strange because then the Whigs felt like it was too much power for Andrew Jackson to veto something that they felt as Whigs would be beneficial to the United States. So coming back to our notes on the Whig side, keep in mind it's the Whigs that are developing because they do not like Andrew Jackson. They don't like his stance and his policies, and they think that maybe he really doesn't know what he's talking about this whole federal government thing because he says he likes a small federal government, but he's acting like a big, powerful executive leader, like a king. Another example of what Andrew Jackson did that a lot of Whigs and a lot of Americans didn't like was he's responsible for the Trail of Tears. You've probably learned about that before in either elementary school or middle school. And so the Indian Removal Act of 1830 was signed into law by Andrew Jackson. When the Cherokee in Georgia actually went to the Supreme Court and asked to stay in Georgia, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of them and was going to allow the Cherokee tribe to stay in Georgia. But Andrew Jackson said, I will not go along with that. And he actually took the military and being the commander-in-chief of the military and forced the Native Americans out of Georgia, therefore, of course, not paying attention at all to what the Supreme Court had ruled in favor of the Cherokee. So that's why we have a cartoon that looks like this, and a lot of people that don't like Andrew Jackson and his, what people feel like his misuse of his power of the presidency. Now the problem is after Andrew Jackson was no longer president, and his term of office was 1829 to 1837, so he served 2 terms, the Whigs really didn't have a reason to remain any longer. Their whole point was to combat and challenge Andrew Jackson. But there was a new and more important dividing issue for America at that time, and that dividing issue wasn't just slavery, but the expansion of slavery in the United States. So if you'll take a look at this map, this is the Missouri Compromise, which was passed in 1820. And this compromise was about allowing free and slave states to enter the Union. Our Congress tried to keep an even balance of slave and free states entering the Union together throughout the 1800s up until, of course, the Civil War, in order to try to prevent a civil war. Well, that didn't work. So if you had one slave state to enter the nation, you would have to have a free state to enter the nation in order to try to keep the balance of power equitable in Congress. And so if you'll take a look with the expansion of slavery as we're moving westward in these unorganized territories, Michigan Territory, Oregon Country, even into Mexico and the Arkansas Territory, the expansion of slavery became the biggest talking point in our country. And so the Democrats, if you notice on the right side of your screen, they still remain as a political party. They're still there. Now, these guys, remember, are about states' rights and smaller federal government to a certain extent. They, of course, like Thomas Jefferson had said, they want to focus on agriculture for the focus of our nation instead of industry. So these guys are going to support slavery. You're going to find a lot of people in the South, and even Western farmers are going to oftentimes be Democrats. That sounds a little strange because today's Democrats aren't like that, are they? There is something that changes that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. On the left side of your screen, If you take a look, that's where the Republicans are going to be formed in 1854, specifically as an anti-slave party to challenge these Democrat slave owners, and they're going to be a party that's located in the North. They are going to be focused, of course, on bigger federal government, kind of like the Federalists, and of course, one of the most famous Republican presidents that we'd had would be Abraham Lincoln. This is the foundation of today's political parties. However, after the Civil War, in the early 1900s actually, you're going to find that these two political parties, their platforms are going to totally switch. For example, taking a look at your screen, a new dividing issue in the 1930s is going to be the Great Depression. So what happens is that FDR as a president is going to be a Democrat. Again, Democrats tended to believe in a smaller federal government, but the problem is that FDR was an American first. I mean, yeah, he was a Democrat, but he said, we have a problem as a nation, and he was going to do all that he could to try to fix it and try to get America out of the Great Depression. So what he did was he turned his platform upside down. Instead of small federal government, he went with big federal government to fix this problem, because that was more important to him than just adhering to a small federal government platform. So he launched a set of New Deal plans in order to try to help not only people who were in poverty, but also minority groups in the United States. And it did help a good deal, but it didn't get us out of the Great Depression. If you remember, it was the production that we had during World War II that actually got us out of the Depression. But FDR's platform, of course, his New Deal plan, changed the platform of the Democrats to be one of stronger federal government, more federal government involvement in your life, and also the party that champions minority groups. The Republicans, in order to challenge FDR, actually adopt a smaller federal government stance and platform in response to these Democrats' policies in the Great Depression, basically the New Deal. So this whole issue creates a change, the issue being the Great Depression, creates a change in the political parties' platforms. So what I want to point out and make sure you understand that these dividing issues, the Great Depression, the expansion of slavery in the United States, the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, are actually the main dividing issues that we have with our political parties and political beliefs, and it's those issues that create the platforms for our political parties that we're studying. So let's take a look at today. Today we have the Democrats. You'll see those actually on the right side of your screen. They still believe in big federal government involvement in your life. They're called liberals because liberal means a lot. They believe in a lot of federal government involvement in your life socially and economically. They're also considered left-wing. Now that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more in class on what's called the political spectrum. But I'd like to draw that on the board for you. On the left side of your screen, you'll see Republicans. Now Republicans believe in a smaller federal government where you have more states' involvement in your life because, of course, the Republicans believe that the states can understand and be more responsive to people and their problems. They're more conservative in terms of the amount of federal government involved in your life socially and economically, and they're considered to be on the political spectrum right-wing. However, let's circle back to that dividing issue. You see there it's in red now. It is still how much power should the federal government have in your life? So that's a question you guys are going to have to decide. How much federal government involvement are you willing or do you think there should be in your life? Generally, everybody's answer is just enough, but enough for you might not be enough for me. And yes, the answer to that question could probably create another great debate for our classes. However, on the lighter side, I have a bonus question for you. So now that we're coming to the end of this screencast, I'd like for you to, if you want a quick and easy 2-point extra credit assignment answer, and you can put these 2 points on a test in the future. The question is, of course, how did the donkey become the symbol for the Democrats and the elephant become a symbol for the Republicans? If you'll do a little bit of research on that, you can go to Canvas, and in modules under the assignment Donkey and Elephant bonus, it's at the bottom of modules. If you'll click on that, and in the text entry, write your answer and include where you found your information. So you just put your answer in your website link, and then you submit that. If you get it correct, and it's in your own words, so I don't want you to copy and paste or get it from somebody else, but you can earn up to 2 points extra credit on a test. And there's the Canvas link at the bottom, so you know exactly where to go in Canvas to submit your bonus question answer. And of course, George Washington being there when you specifically said no political parties, yet people are going to create them anyway. I'm sorry, no one listens to George. Maybe if Thomas Jefferson said that, people would have listened. But anyway, you've reached the end of this screencast number 2. If you have any questions, please bring them to class and let me know. And also don't forget to bring your notes to class and be ready to turn those in. I'll see you soon.